class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing Game 22 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the Washington Capitals, in which the Sharks have won 2-1. Now, 2 straight victories for the San Jose Sharks, and in fact, if you take a look at their last 7 home games, they've won 5 of them. That may very well be their only 5 wins of the entire season, so we will not talk about what has happened on the road this year, but as they say, if you are going to win games, try to do it in front of your home crowd to make it at the very least somewhat exciting to go to games, and that's exactly what the Sharks have been able to do. When it comes to this particular game, it wasn't the most exciting one on the scoreboard. It certainly looks closer, but if I take a look at the previous game against the Vancouver Canucks, that one was quite exciting down to the wire. Here tonight, not so much, besides a few posts being hit by Washington, which gives this game a sort of what-if type of feeling. It was otherwise pretty low event, not a ton of chances either way. Blackwood did have to be quite good at times, but certainly not as consistently good as he has had to be at other points thus far this season, which is more so a testament to how bad the Sharks have otherwise been outside of these last couple of games, but still not challenged nearly as much. On the other side, therefore, Washington, Kemper was very rarely challenged here tonight, but enough for the Sharks to get 2 goals and to only give up 1 for the full 2 points in the standings. This one starts off with a Fabian Zetterlund goal, and as of course we know, the Sharks scoring first bodes well for them as a team, gives them a chance to win, so an important first goal to make it 1-0 San Jose at the end of 20 minutes. Heading into the second period, it's looking decent enough for the Sharks that they're going to be able to hold on to this 1-0 lead, but Kuznetsov in the last few minutes of the second period ties the game up and 1, and that is the score we head into the third period with. In the third period, the Sharks get a power play, and their power play as of late has been quite impressive. Here tonight, it wasn't that great. They were sorely missing Tomas Hertl, something I'll get to a bit later on that power play. And on the specific one that kind of ends up scoring on, nothing is doing. They're having their usual issues entering the zone, but eventually just a quick play between Bailey and Cunnin gets him his 5th goal of the season and the eventual game winner in this one. And it was an impressive finish for the San Jose Sharks, not because they kept pushing and getting chances, but they prevented the Capitals from really doing much of anything in the last few minutes. Usually it is the shoe is on the other foot, and it is the Sharks who are kept into their own neutral zone and their own defensive zone in the last couple of minutes, unable to get the goaltender out. But this time the Sharks were doing that to the Capitals, and so they kind of had to force Kemper out of the net with about 80 seconds to go in the third period before they even had like a full-on chance of entering the zone, which allowed it so that Granlund got an opportunity to pretty much put the game away with an empty net shot right away. Unfortunately, he would miss it. It would lead to an icing, and then the Capitals would be able to get settled, but the Sharks did a fantastic job killing off the previous couple of minutes, didn't give the Washington Capitals a lot to work with, and that definitely helped close off this game 2-1. Moving on to the players to talk about, like I just mentioned, Tomas Hertl was injured here for tonight's game, and already, as we know, the Sharks are missing Couture and Barabanov, so to also have Hertl out of the lineup for a team that already has struggles scoring goals, it was not really a good recipe. Nobody would have been surprised to see the San Jose Sharks lose this game with, perhaps even just getting shut out. And yet, they clawed, they fought, and they actually managed to come out on top. Having said that, the fill-in for the top-line center role was Luke Kunin, and at even strength, this line did very little. Kunin at even strength, he had the power play goal, kudos to him, but it was clearly not the same player as what Tomas Hertl brings to this line, which was a massive hindrance to both of the wingers here. Obviously, some onus is on those two players to at least drive the line forward in some ways. Hoffman, not so much because you're not really expecting it, but perhaps this would have been an opportunity for Eklund to really step up. And while Eklund did have a couple of nice passes, one I believe in front to Hoffman, or was it Zetterlund perhaps, that was a pretty close opportunity, but otherwise not that really much doing for Eklund, and he was definitely sorely missing the center that he has been next to for each of the past few games. Kunin, like I mentioned, not really doing much much at even strength. And while Hoffman, I do think, had a generally positive game for San Jose like he has recently, and even had a couple of okay chances to score here, he is unable to continue his goal streak, and you have to point to the fact that Hertl is missing in this one as perhaps a big reason why. So the first line, not exactly doing a ton, which gave an opportunity for the second line, which was kept together for tonight's game, to actually be the sort of leading the charge group for the San Jose Sharks, and I would say they did a decent job at that. Not amazing. This line never exactly got consistent shifts in the offensive zone like we more so were seeing from the first line these past few games, but I thought that they were each individually pretty good at times in this game. Obviously, Zetterlund managing to score that goal, his 6th of the season, tying him for the team lead, was quite impressive. It was just generally a nice play by Zetterlund, who read it quite well, and he had some very positive shifts for San Jose. Also interesting to see him get some time on the penalty kill. I don't believe we've really seen much of that, if at all, in the earlier parts of this season, but with Tomas Hertl injured tonight, and he had some pretty hefty penalty killing time himself, Zetterlund gets the opportunity and actually looked pretty decent in that role. When it comes to the two other players here, Granlund continues to get better and better. His skill is becoming more so seen in these last few games for sure. I had hyped up when Granlund was acquired from the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Erik Karlsson trade that Granlund was at one point in his career a very, very good playmaker, an underrated playmaker as well, and early on this season we really weren't seeing any of that. Granlund was more so a liability at times for the San Jose Sharks, but he's definitely putting that skill level on display. Yes, it does occasionally lead to some bad giveaways that obviously don't look particularly good and you're not exactly excited to see, obviously, but more often than not they are leading some really nice chances, and so it kind of reminds me in a bit of a Joe Thornton type of player. Thornton had a tendency to give pucks away. If you took a look at the sort of giveaways once he was like in the more earlier parts of his career where he was getting significant ice time with the San Jose Sharks, you took a look at the giveaway numbers around the league even, and Joe Thornton would usually find himself relatively high up on the list, but that's mostly because he has the puck so much and is trying to dish it out so much that yes, there are some giveaways that come with that, but more often than not you're also getting great chances and even goals. Granlund obviously not to the extremes of Thornton because he's not nearly as good of a playmaker as Thornton was in his prime, but has that sort of element to his game, and it's nice to see it popping up in these last few. When it comes to Anthony Duclair, still waiting for some sort of ramp up. Duclair is in the past a 30-goal scorer, a 50-point scorer, and we have yet to actually seen that in action with the San Jose Sharks, but he has at least been pretty good, and if he didn't have that reputation preceding him where you're expecting him to have done well and get himself up high valued for the trade deadline, you'd think that he's at least pretty decent enough, but he probably also would have been demoted from the second line if he was not named Anthony Duclair, so I guess it's kind of a two-way street there. Generally, it was a good game for Duclair, just not exactly what you're hoping to see. When it comes to the third line, we have Sturm, McDonald, and Labanc, but this third line did not last particularly long while Labanc got the opportunity in the top 9, as we know with David Quinn, very quick on the trigger with Kevin Labanc, and so he gets quickly demoted down to the fourth line in favor of Justin Bailey, who I will talk about here at decent length. The San Jose Sharks, with the injury to Filip Zadina, needed a player to come up as they did not want to run a 7/8 defense, hopefully, ever again in the history of the league. So in calling up a player from the AHL, they had multiple young options. Obviously, they could have gone back with Gushin. They could have brought back up Bordeleau, but instead they go with Justin Bailey. Now, he is not a young option, even though he is an AHL player, more of one of those veteran types of guys who has already many years not only in the AHL, but even a few stints in the NHL under his belt. And he's been doing very well with the San Jose Barracuda, so he's certainly deserving of the call-up compared to, let's say, when it was Oscar Lindblom getting called up a couple of weeks ago with his, 2 points in 9 games or whatever it was. Bailey is right up there in terms of point scoring with the minor league team. So he gets the opportunity, he's immediately bumped up to the third line, and he actually looked quite good throughout this game. Managed to get some decent forechecking shifts with Sturm and McDonald in the offensive zone, which is more so than what you could say with Luke Cunnin, who was the player in this particular position last game with the San Jose Sharks. He had a couple of decent looks on the power play, including the pass that led, very nice pass by the way, with some strong work on the boards that led to the Luke Cunnin goal, plus an opportunity on the breakaway in the early parts of the second period, which could have given the San Jose Sharks a 2-0 lead at that point if it wasn't just barely missed. So it was definitely a very good outing for Justin Bailey, absolutely earned an opportunity in the lineup for the next game, and especially with the injury to Kevin Labanc, he definitely should maintain this top 9 spot here with the San Jose Sharks. When it comes to the two other players on his line, Nico Sturm looked quite solid defensively. I thought he was also pretty good and definitely had his game somewhat elevated by the appearance of Justin Bailey, who was definitely much more helpful on the forecheck than, no offense to Luke Cunnin, him. Bailey, much more of a bigger body type of player who's more akin to being able to work well on the boards. Luke Cunnin, not exactly a floater. He does play the body, is quite physical, but more so someone who's kind of like a Mike Hoffman, where he's going for those chances in front of the net. He's positioning himself right there. He's not exactly bumping bodies along the boards, let's say, like Justin Bailey was, and especially Justin Bailey's larger frame was very valuable in tonight's game against the Capitals, who were playing a very physical game that the Sharks did a good job at responding to. And then when it comes to Jacob McDonald, I still don't really like him on this third line, but it seems to be some sort of long-term solution in the eyes of David Quinn, at least until multiple players are back from injury for the Sharks, so I guess we're stuck with him there. When it comes to the fourth line, we have Carpenter, Smith, as well as Labanc joining them pretty quickly. I actually thought the fourth line was pretty good. Definitely much better than they have been as of late. Definitely some solid offensive zone shifts. To talk a bit about Labanc prior to him getting injured later on in this game, though I believe he did return to the game, so who knows if he's actually out longer term or anything like that, if you might miss a game or two. I actually thought Labanc played decently solid, definitely better than he has as of late, which, like I said, is the general theme of the fourth line here tonight. So I guess that was pretty nice to see. When it comes to defensively, we have the top pairing of Ferraro and Emberson. Emberson, I thought, had a really good game here tonight. I am quite biased this season towards Sharks defensemen who show even an inkling of offensive capabilities in these games, and Emberson was doing that a good amount here tonight. And so while his defensive game was still pretty solid but not outstanding, the fact that he was jumping up in the play, willing to make things happen, and actively looking for opportunities to pinch in and keep plays alive in the offensive zone, I have to give the credit to him for being able to do that, because literally nobody else on the San Jose Sharks throughout this much of the season have really been stepping up to try and make that happen. So Emberson doing it is definitely a positive. When it comes to his defensive partner Mario Ferraro, he also is making that effort. I've pointed that out in each of the last couple of games, and while he somewhat oddly doesn't seem to have the same, it's crazy because Emberson is known as more of a defensive guy, so to see him jump up offensively and at least make like some things work is quite nice to see. Ferraro, for how long he's been in the NHL, it's not like an extended period of like 10 years, but he is one of the more veteran defensemen in this lineup, played more than Burrows and Emberson and Addison and Ohotyuk. Only Benning, I would say, has more, I believe, NHL games than Ferraro does. But for someone who's been in the lineup for a good while with the San Jose Sharks, played a ton of time with Brent Burns, who is one of the best offensive defensemen of the last 10 years in the entire league, never mind with the San Jose Sharks, you would think he'd have a bit more offensive acumen to his game, and that's just not really existent. But at least defensively, he does things decently well, or at least he has been able to do so this season, so that's nice. When it comes to the second pairing here, we have Benning and Addison. Addison took a huge hit from Tom Wilson early on in this game, and that's, I'm not going to say it was like directly correlated to how the rest of his performance here tonight went, but from an offensive standpoint, Addison seemed to be having a bit of issues, not in terms of jumping up in the play, which he was definitely willing to do, but with just general puck management in the offensive zone. While his defensive game was definitely serviceable here tonight, it was the offensive game that was a bit off, and I don't know, again, if that is correlated to the big hit that he actually ended up taking, or just generally just an off game for Addison, but not amazing in that regard. Matt Benning, I also wasn't amazing. I wasn't super happy with his performance here tonight. It was okay, kind of like with Calen Addison, at least in the defensive zone, but he's also the type of defenseman who really isn't jumping up into the play, and like I said, I'm very biased towards that, and Benning is probably the least the player who's doing that the least in the lineup here tonight. And then when it comes to the final pairing, we have Burrows and Okhotyuk. Surprising to see Okhotyuk back in the lineup in favor of Marc-Edouard Vlasic, something I thought I would never actually say this season, because Vlasic played pretty well in the previous game against the Vancouver Canucks, so I thought he had earned himself another game. But David Quinn deciding to go back to Okhotyuk, one of the very few times we actually see Quinn favoring the younger player over the older player, and so I'll welcome it, I guess. So Okhotyuk draws back into the lineup. Defensively, still some issues. Didn't have as many terrible turnovers, but general positioning wasn't a strong suit tonight for Okhotyuk. But on the offensive side of things, he was extremely aggressive, which was quite nice to see, jumping up in the play. Got another assist here tonight as he continues to actually be putting up a decent amount of points, or an okay amount of points, I should say, from a Sharks defensive standpoint. So I guess in the end, that is a bit of a positive for him. When it comes to his defender partner Burrows, it felt as though a pretty big fall off. Burrows had a really strong game the other night against the Vancouver Canucks. Here tonight, I would say a decent drop off for sure. Burrows not nearly as good. Perhaps that's because, like I've mentioned in the past, Burrows seems semi-reliant on his defensive partner more so than other players on this team. And so because Okhotyuk in the defensive zone wasn't doing a great job, Burrows himself wasn't doing a great job compared to the previous game where Vlasic was doing well. So Burrows was doing well, but I guess that's the story of the game. And then finally, we have the goaltender. Blackwood steps in between the pipes here tonight after a solid outing for Kähkönen in the previous one. And Blackwood plays very well, only lets in the single goal, which you can't even put any blame on him for. He makes the save. The puck then goes off of Okhotyuk into the net. So that's a tough one. Otherwise, made bunch of other amazing saves. Obviously, a few posts certainly bailed him out. Maybe this is a different story if the Capitals get slightly more lucky and the Sharks lose like 3-2 or something along those lines. But, of course, that didn't happen. This is not the parallel universe where it did. This is our universe, and in that one, Blackwood played well. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Thursday, where they will be heading back on the road. As I mentioned, while the Sharks have been doing very well as of late at home, their road record still leaves them without any road wins, and we'll see if the Sharks can turn that around. Class dismissed.